Welcome Asher at this time.
Shalom Aleichem. Hey, you speak Hebrew. You answer back in Hebrew. Please take your seat. You're welcome to sit. That's how Christ would be greeting his disciples. Every time he saw them, he would say, Shalom Aleichem. Peace be unto you. I want to thank Pastor Tim Peters and Pastor Tony Tommel for the invitation, for the very warm welcome. I am honored to be here. I'm happy to be here, and I feel at home. I am with friends. I am with my brothers and sisters who share the very same belief in one God. We all share the very same belief in one God. We are all children of Abraham. I am a child of Abraham by blood. You are the children of Abraham by faith. I feel at home. We belong to the very same family, members of the very same family, the very same branches. We're the natural branches, you're grafted in. But they belong to the very same tree. And the roots of that tree is in the land of Israel. That's where your roots are, by the way. So I came here to tell you a little bit about my country, my homeland, and also ask you to come to Israel. To me, it's so obvious. Everybody should be coming to Israel. That should be the very first place to come. Why? That's where your roots are. That's where Christianity was born. That's where Jesus lived. If you take a few trips away, that's where Christ spent all his life. That's where he was born. That's where he grew up. That's where he walked. That's where he taught. That's where he performed his miracles. That's where he chose his disciples. That's where he ministered. That's where it started. By coming to Israel and visiting those places, you shall be walking in the footsteps of Christ. And when you do that, the Bible will come to life. It will open up. And believe me, it's going to be a life-changing experience. Folks, a life-changing experience. You know, Israel is a fulfillment of a prophecy. It's a dream that came true. It's a prayer that has been answered. In Isaiah 11, verse 12, it says, the Lord will gather the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. And my brothers and sisters, this prophecy is being fulfilled today. The Jewish people are being gathered from the four corners of the earth. In my lifetime, in your lifetime, I am a lucky and the blessed Israeli, an Israeli Jew, that in my lifetime, I can live through this. I can see it. My people are back home. We were uprooted from our land, forced to exile 2,000 years ago. We never forgot Zion. We knew that God would bring us back. And he brought us back. We are back in our homeland. We are rebuilding our land. We are reclaiming our land. And the land is rebuilding us. We Jews are Judeans. That's what a Jew means. In Hebrew, it's much more clear. In Hebrew, a Jew is Yehudi. And Judea is Yehudah. A Jew means a Judean. Somebody who comes from Judea. Somebody who belongs to Judea. We came back to Judea. And we're rebuilding ourselves. And my friends, in Isaiah 35, it says, the desert will rejoice and blossom as a rose. When you come to Israel, what used to be a desert is not a desert anymore. The desert, the land is happy because his people are back. The Jewish people are back to Judea. The Judeans are back in Judea, reclaiming the land, rebuilding the land. You know, I always give the example of a very well-known American traveler, Mark Twain. He came here in 1860s, 1867. He wrote a book. It became a bestseller, The Innocents Abroad. It's still a bestseller. In his book, he says, when he came to Israel, he expected to find a huge country like United States, you know. And he comes to Israel, he finds this tiny piece of land. You know, we're so tiny that on the world map, you don't have enough space to write down the word Israel. We can only, you know, maybe put an I, and if you're lucky, add an S. You know, we're so tiny. And he also says, when he came here, they would be traveling miles, long distances, and not see one single person and not see one single tree. It was desert, desolation. And you come to Israel today, where the mountain used to be barren with only thistles and thorns, you see trees, forest. What used to be malaria-infested swamps, today they are fertile valleys. You see the land rejoicing, the land is happy, people are back. You know, for 2,000 years, the land of Israel was occupied by different empires, by the Assyrians, by the Babylonians, by the Persians, Greeks, Romans, Arabs, Crusaders, Mamluks, Turks, British. They all left. And when they were here, when they occupied Israel, the land became the neglected, unbuilt backyard of those empires. Nobody rebuilt it. The land waited for its people to come, for the Jewish people to come to be rebuilt, my friends. And, you know, another reason to come here would be, when you come to Israel, you'll be blessing us. And when you bless us, you'll be blessed. That's what the Bible says, right? I will bless those who bless me, and I will curse those who curse me. Now, it's very important to come to Israel because, you know, we are so proud. We're a very young nation, and we are so proud of all we've accomplished in such a short time. In 68 years, we have become one of the 7, 8 nations who can launch satellites. We have become a high-tech nation, the second largest Silicon Valley is in Israel, by the way. You know, computer hardware, software, microprocessors, microchips, all developed in Israel. The cell phones you use, Israeli invention. The GPS, the drip irrigation, the cherry tomatoes you people eat. Do you like them, by the way? You enjoy eating them? From Israel. I could give you a long list of all the Israeli innovations, inventions, and you will be late for breakfast tomorrow morning. I won't do it. We can be proud of everything we've done, but there is one field that we are not doing a good job. We're failing, unfortunately. You know what that is? Our enemies. We've been through 6 wars, by the way. In 1948, a few hours after Israel's independence was proclaimed, we were attacked, were invaded by 5 Arab armies, and we survived. In 1967, 3 Arab armies were about to attack us, to destroy us. You know, since I'm a kid, we had some problems with some issues with our neighbors. You know, I've been hearing the very same thing. You know, they kept saying that they want to drive us to the sea. And, you know, my dad took them seriously. He made sure I knew how to swim well, you know. And I took them seriously too. I made sure my kids know how to swim well. By the way, one of my daughters became the Israeli swimming champion. Then they tried to, you know, attack us again. God was with us. We survived. After 6 wars, our enemies have realized that there's no way they can defeat us on the battlefield. So what they're doing now is they've launched a different kind of warfare, a propaganda war, a terrible propaganda war of lies, misinformation, in order to demonize and to delegitimize us, folks. And people don't know much about Israel. Some don't know anything about Israel, and they believe those lies. You know, we are portrayed as occupiers in the world, in media, on the news. Occupying from whom? We came back to our land. We were forced to exile. We had the right to come back. And we came back, and we're rebuilding our land. It's our land. So when you come to Israel, you will see what Israel's about. And you know, they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? When you come to Israel and see what you see in Israel, what you see, no words will be sufficient. Again, wherever you are in Israel, folks, no matter where you are, you look around, it's overwhelming. Every mountain, every hill, every valley, every rock, every pebble have so much history. You'll see the Bible come alive, by the way. So that's another good reason to come. You know, they asked me what Israel, what Zionism is about. One example I gave is, in 1948, as I said, a few hours after Israel was established, we were invaded by 5 Arab armies who tried to destroy us. We survived. It was a very bloody war. It was the most bloody war we Israelis went through. 1% of the Israeli population died in that war. The Israeli population in 1948 was 600,000 Jews. 6,000 Jews lost their lives in our independence war. But we survived, by the way. And you know what? After having survived, in the next 4 years, between 1948 and 1952, there was close to 1 million Jewish immigrants that poured into the country. Just imagine a population of 600,000 Jews who have gone through, who have survived a very bloody war, hardly enough food, hardly enough housing, hardly enough jobs for its veteran population. You have 1 million Jewish brothers and sisters coming. How do you do it? We did it. We did not refuse one of our Jewish brothers and sisters. We accept them all. It wasn't easy. That's what Israel's about. Israel's about 600,000 Jews being able to integrate, absorb 1 million Jewish brothers and sisters. I could keep, again, I have a long list of all we've accomplished, but I would like to show you a little bit from my country, which I hope will serve as an appetizer, just the appetizer. The festive meal will be when you come to Israel. That's the real meal, by the way. When groups come to Israel, they will land, in Tel Aviv, and the next morning, they will check in, they will rest, and be ready for the attack the next morning. And the next morning, the first stop will be Caesarea, a very significant place for the Christian world. That's actually where the gospel was opened to the Gentiles. It started in Joppa with a very important vision of Peter's. I'm sure you all remember. In this vision, actually, Peter was told to teach and preach, not only to the Jewish people, but to the Gentiles. What God has cleaned, don't call common or unclean. And it continues in Caesarea. When Peter came to visit Cornelius, he told him, God has shown me, not to call any man common or unclean. So, as you all know, the gift of the Holy Spirit actually were poured, not only on the Jews, but on the Gentiles too. That's where the first Gentile was converted, was baptized in Caesarea. You'll be able to see remains of, by the way, that's where Paul was imprisoned for 2 years. That's where Paul appealed to Caesar. Again, when you come there, you'll be right there where these events took place. That's where he was sent from Caesarea to Rome, to be tried by the Roman emperor. And that's where that's where Paul had this very powerful defense in the king's court, by the way, teaching the gospel, preaching the gospel in Caesarea. You remember King Agrippa, like told him, you almost persuaded me to be a Christian. That's where it happened, by the way, in Caesarea. What you see is remnants of the famous aqueduct, which was built by King Herod to conduct water to Caesarea, 6 miles long aqueduct. Unfortunately, most of it is destroyed. You see remnants here and there. That's one of them. And then you'll be able to see the remains of the Roman theaters built by King Herod. It's all in Caesarea. By the way, King Herod built there. It took him 12 years. He built a huge city, a large city, and a large port, by the way. The next site is going to be Megiddo, Armageddon. Actually, Armageddon is 2 Hebrew words. You should learn Hebrew. You know why? When we all go up, that's language we will be speaking, in Hebrew. So it's very important to learn Hebrew. Megiddo was a city which was built by King Solomon, and Armageddon is actually means the mountain of Megiddo, Har Megiddo, which got distorted and is known as Armageddon. That's where the very final battle, the battle of the battles, will take place, in the valley of Armageddon. What you see is the historical hill, the Mount Tel Megiddo. Right here, the archaeologists discovered 25 layers of destruction, my friends. Mount Carmel. Later on, we'll be climbing up. Again, we're right now along the Mediterranean coast, by the way. We'll be climbing up Mount Carmel. We shall be on one of the 3 highest points on Mount Carmel. This specific point is believed to be the place where a very, very well-known confrontation or contest took place between the prophet Elijah and the false prophets of Baal. One of my favorite stories, by the way. That's where Elijah proved that our God, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is a true God. Tripoli, as we call it in Hebrew, or Sepphoris, is only about 4 miles away from Nazareth, where Jesus spent his childhood and adulthood. And it's being dug right now, the city of Sepphoris. It was a large city, by the way. It was known as a cultural center. It was very famous for its rabbinical academies. And I have little doubt to believe that Christ must have spent some time in Sepphoris. He must have continued his higher education in one of the rabbinical academies, which were in Sepphoris, right next door to Nazareth. It's becoming a highlight nowadays. Sea of Galilee, that's where it started. And that's where Jesus started his ministry, in the Sea of Galilee. That's where he chose his disciples. That's where he saw the 2 brothers casting their net into the sea. He said to them, "Follow me, I'll make you fishers of men." They left their net and they followed him. That's where he performed most of his miracles. That's where he, after having left Nazareth, Capernaum became his own city, by the way. Capernaum, which means the village of consolation, or the village of Nahum, became Jesus' headquarters. He spent his childhood and adulthood in Nazareth. He was rejected by the people living in his village. He left Nazareth, came to Capernaum. And in Capernaum, you're going to see the remains of the synagogue back from Christ's time. So when you go into the synagogue and stand, and walk, you'll be at the same place where Christ would be standing, teaching, preaching, reading the portion of the law of the prophets 2,000 years ago. You'll be literally following in the footsteps of Christ. One of those places that we have no question mark, no traditional, right there. You'll be in the synagogue, by the way. Then you'll be driving up to a place called Banyas. We Israelis call it Banyas, but the historical name is Caesarea Philippi. Again, a very significant place. It was in Caesarea Philippi that for the very first time, one of Christ's disciples, Peter, confessed that he is the Christ, the Son of living God. That's where it happened. That's where Jesus gave Peter the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and he said, on this rock of revelation, of course, I'll build my church. And by the way, this cave that you see, that's back in Christ's time, that's where the spring would pop out. Now they start down below, but it was known as the gates of hell. It was a pagan, cult, a pagan place. They'd be sacrificing, animals. And you remember, the gates of hell shall not prevail. You'll be right there. Tel Dan, right next to, not far away from Caesarea Philippi, which is on the Golan. Down below is Tel Dan, this biblical city. Originally, the tribe of Dan were supposed to settle in today's Tel Aviv, Joppa area by the Mediterranean. But they could not conquer the area given to their tribe. They had no choice but look for another, a substitute. They went up and they settled in today Dan. And in Tel Dan, you're going to see 2 highlights. One is the remains of a monumental temple and the altar, which was built by Jeroboam. If you remember, he was the king of Israel, the very first king after the split, after Solomon's death, you can actually see the remains of both the temple and the altar built by Jeroboam. Jeroboam didn't want the northern tribes to continue going to Jerusalem for pilgrimage. So he decides to build two temples, we are told, in Bethel and Dan, to try to create a different national identity, a different spiritual center. And you'll also be able to see remains of a gate